Thanks. It's a great pleasure to be here. And this is my first time in Israel, and it certainly won't be my last. I have to say that I've really been impressed by this conference and also really impressed by how much attention this issue has garnered from the Israeli government and the Israeli people. And really, this is a worldwide phenomenon. I remember meeting with some folks from Israel about 4 years ago when they were thinking about creating the National Cyber Bureau, and it's just amazing to see how much progress has been made and how much high-level attention. In the U.S., President Obama really cares deeply about this issue and cared about it when he came into office, into the presidency, because when he was campaigning, his campaign had been hacked into, and that's one of the things that he referenced when he gave a major speech after we did the cyberspace policy review at the White House. But hearing last night the Prime Minister speak really passionately about this issue and really understanding all of the dimensions of it, I think were tremendous. And really all the speakers, both from Israel, from around the world, have been fascinating this conference as well. And I'm privileged to go to Beersheba tomorrow to see this new initiative, and I'm excited about that as well. I have been doing this a very long time in different capacities, and even before going to the White House, I was involved in fighting cybercrime. I was a criminal prosecutor, federal prosecutor who did major hacking cases back in the 90s and then helped run our Justice Department system. So I am, because of that, a recovering lawyer. And I'll start off by telling a lawyer joke because I normally would start off telling a lawyer joke just to kind of break the ice, but the problem with lawyer jokes I've learned in my long experience as a lawyer, or a recovering lawyer at this point, is that when you tell a lawyer joke, lawyers don't think they're funny, and non-lawyers don't think they're jokes. So I won't tell. I actually will end with a hacker joke at the end. I think a lot has happened here, and we've heard during this conference, and clearly this is a world, and we're in a world that's benefited really tremendously from the Internet's rapid growth. It's just a social and economic driver that's really changed the world. And the words of my boss, Secretary Kerry, it has linked us all in a human chain that spans the globe. And the Internet has generated new methods of doing business, transformed the way we interact, and really it transformed the way nations deal with each other as well. At the same time, we've become aware that these new benefits do not come without challenges. As we all become more dependent on the Internet, we also are more vulnerable to threats on the Internet. Indeed, President Obama said early on in his administration that the great irony of our information age is that the very technologies that empower us to create and to build also empower those who would disrupt and destroy. So accordingly, government-sponsored IP theft, threats to critical infrastructure, and of course the dangers of cybercrime have all risen to the top of the policy agenda. At the same time, the growth of the Internet worldwide has intensified debates about how cyberspace should be governed, and we've also seen increasing issues with respect to repressive regimes trying to undermine human rights online because they see an open Internet as a threat to their stability. And indeed, many of those regimes, when they talk about cybersecurity, really mean talking about content and controlling content. I think one of the things that we heard yesterday in some of the speeches, and one of the things I've seen during the time I've been doing this issue, is this has transformed from an issue that I think was left mostly to people who are the technical experts to now something that really is a major national security issue, a major economic issue, a major human rights issue, and a major foreign policy issue. So these challenges, I think, raise an important question of how we can both keep this technology and promote this technology whose ultimate reach and ultimate benefits we still have yet to grasp, and make sure we can also safely depend upon it. The title of this session is National Strategies and National Cybersecurity Strategies, but I'm going to go a little bit beyond that. I'm going to talk about international strategies and international cooperation. And national strategies usually deal with things you could do domestically to guard against threats. And it's, of course, critically important that countries develop a coordinated, what we call a whole-of-government approach to these cross-cutting issues with articulated roles and responsibilities. And many countries around the world are developing national strategies. And national strategies have a couple of real benefits to them. One, they really prioritize this issue as a major policy issue and not just a technical issue, although the technical part's important. And second, it really makes governments think about what the roles are of different agencies, what the roles are of the private sector and civil society, how this all works. And indeed, when we were doing our national strategy, it very much it got all those things crystallized and made us think about it in a more structured way. But another part of this is how you deal internationally. What is your international strategy? How can you promote cybersecurity through international interactions? The U.S., and I was privileged to help work on this when I was at the White House and then implement it now at the State Department, has something called the International Strategy, President Obama's International Strategy on Cyberspace that was released in May of 2011. It was then the first of its kind in the world, although other countries are now following suit. And it articulates the U.S. vision of a cyberspace as, and I quote, a place where norms of responsible, just, and peaceful conduct among states and people have begun to take hold, and commits to, and again I quote, an international cyberspace policy that empowers the innovation that drives our economy and improves the lives here and abroad. Most importantly, the international strategy reflects our conviction that if all nations and people of the world are to reap the tremendous political, economic, and social benefits that cyberspace offers, cyberspace must be open, interoperable, secure, and reliable. And we must and can have all of those things together. At the same time, we recognize to achieve this vision, our efforts must be multifaceted. Building resilience and reducing risk in cyberspace is not only, as I said, a technical endeavor. It requires that we stitch together a panoply of institutions, norms, cooperative mechanisms, not just domestically, but around the world. It requires, among other things, a concerted diplomatic effort, which is why my office was created at the State Department now just a little over 3 years ago. So I want to describe what my office does and what our major priorities are in this issue. And I should also note that Israel, and you'll be hearing from my counterpart in Israel as well, has established a similar post. So let me describe some of these major priorities. One of those priorities as we do the foreign policy interaction is what we call cybersecurity due diligence. By this we mean the principle that states should recognize and act on their responsibility to protect information infrastructure and secure national systems from damage or misuse. These are the things countries can and should do domestically. This is having national strategies in place. This is having institutions like national level computer emergency response teams. This is, in the U.S., the President Obama had an executive order to talk about what kinds of frameworks we should have for the private critical infrastructure, and our Commerce Department created the voluntary framework for cybersecurity that is now being implemented. But the security of those systems are also tied very much to other countries and the resilience of systems worldwide. And because of that, it's important for every country to do its part. We use our diplomatic engagements and other channels to emphasize the importance of good cybersecurity, good due diligence, and the shared goal of a more reliable and secure cyberspace. So we do that through a number of different things. We work collaboratively on network defense on an operational level. We work on incident management and response with other countries. We support the development of these capabilities around the world. And we also support our administration's priorities in cybersecurity and actually dealing with some of the threats, like, for instance, helping to make sure that foreign policymakers around the world understand the importance of this issue and we can share information in a more seamless way. Now, I'll give you one example of that. In 2012 to 2013, our financial institutions in the U.S. were subject to a number of denial of service attacks, distributed denial of service attacks that would serve to make it more difficult to interact with their public-facing websites. And we did is we reached out through both technical channels, through our search channels, and through law enforcement channels, but also we reached out through diplomatic channels. We did something called a diplomatic démarche. And I used to think before going to the State Department you could only have negative démarches. It sounds like a negative kind of term. But you can have a positive démarche. You can ask the country to do something. And when you're asking a country to do something at that level, it's at a higher political level and diplomatic level, and it drew attention to this issue, and it helped us build this norm, if you will, of cooperation against a shared threat. And that was very effective. The second area A second bucket of activity that we're working on internationally is what we call international security in cyberspace. Some cyber threats, and we've heard about them in the last couple of days, have the potential to constitute threats to national security. And the United States has concluded that the international community needs to strive for what we call international cyber stability. And that's a more peaceful environment where all states are able to positively exploit the benefits of cyberspace, and where there are benefits, where the benefits of state-to-state cooperation outweigh the benefits of conflict, and it helps us avoid conflict because states have little incentive to attack one another. And we're pursuing a couple of major things in this area. First, we are working to develop a shared understanding about norms of acceptable state behavior in cyberspace, which will help enhance stability, ground foreign and defense policies, guide international partnerships, and help prevent the misunderstandings that can lead to conflict. A great example of this is in recent years, we've had tangible successes in developing these norms in a couple of different arenas. One, in 2013, there's something called the UN Group of Governmental Experts. It's a group of 15 countries back then. It included the United States and Russia and China, and they reached a landmark consensus that international law applies to state conduct in cyberspace. This means that the same international legal principles that promoted predictability and stability between nations during conflict in the kinetic world also apply in cyberspace, and these are things like the UN Charter, the law of armed conflict. They apply equally to cyberspace. It's still unclear exactly how they apply, but it's very important to understand this is not a lawless space. The group also reached a consensus on a number of other important points, including an affirmation of the applicability of the law of state responsibility to cyberspace, the important role of confidence-building measures, and vital importance of capacity building to engage global cooperation in securing cyberspace, and that states shouldn't act through proxies to achieve things that they couldn't do themselves. And the group agreed that a combination of all these things led to greater stability and a more secure cyberspace. The current GGE, the current group of government experts, the first round just began in July, is going to now take this to the next level and look at how we can build on that landmark consensus. And Israel, represented by my colleagues here, is participating in this endeavor. So that's just begun, but I think that's going to be an important meeting. Second, or set of meetings. Second, our international security work is also focused on the establishment of practical cyber risk reduction measures, what we call confidence building measures. These are not really rocket science. This is one of the kind of analogs to other areas, including the nuclear world, where you're trying to build better transparency and trust between countries so you reduce the risk of misperception, inadvertent understandings, misunderstandings, and possible escalation in cyberspace. And because of all the things we've heard about attribution and other issues, these kind of practical confidence-building measures are really critically important. We have been working hard to reach agreements on CBMs, and we've had really a number of achievements there. One, President Obama and President Putin, about 2 years ago now, announced the first set of bilateral confidence-building measures in cyberspace. We have within the 57 countries who are part of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe reached the first set of transparency and confidence-building measures there in cyberspace, and we're working within other regional organizations, including the ARF, to make those more regionally based and to come up with new confidence-building measures. And these are things where transparency measures, knowing who's responsible, having points of contact, having hotlines, again, having national strategies, all these things are good building blocks, even if there are ideological differences, to make sure that you have a safer cyber environment. So that aspect, I talked about the due diligence aspect, I talked about the international security aspect, but that really deals mostly with respect to, especially international security, with state activity. And we understand there's a lot of other actors in cyberspace, a lot of other malicious actors, including cyber criminals. So we also believe that any attempt to deal with this problem, we really need to strengthen our capability internationally to fight cybercrime. And so this is something that was near and dear to me when I was at the Department of Justice and I was a prosecutor, and it's something I carry over into this position too, that because cybercrime is such a transnational issue that we need to make sure we take steps not just domestically but worldwide. And we believe that using as a model and the best practice what we call the Budapest Convention on Cybercrime, that you need to have strong laws in place, strong substantive laws, strong procedural laws that you can, substantive tools, the tools that you need to actually fight this, trained professionals and countries, so there's no weakest link, to do these, and effective mechanisms of international cooperation, including what we call the 24/7 network for high-tech crime, which now has over 60 countries in it. And this is one of our diplomatic priorities, is to promote this. We're also really focused on strengthening our cybercrime cooperation. President Obama announced in a speech earlier this year that one of the problems with these kinds of investigations is often because evidence is stored all over the world, that the mutual legal assistance process is often very slow and doesn't match the digital nature and the digital speed of these crimes. And so we're substantially in the U.S. trying to both bolster our capability to work in the MLAT process to make sure that we can respond to requests from other countries, but also work with other countries so they know better what to ask for and how to ask for it. We can speed these cases along. I just wanted to hit on a couple final points before I leave. Now, I've talked a lot about the cybersecurity, cybercrime, and international security aspects, but one of the things that I wanted to also talk about is some of the other things we're seeing as real policy threats and policy challenges. We have to take a step back from all of this and say, what are the things that we hope we're trying to achieve? What are the positive aspects of cyberspace and what's at risk there? And one of the things that we're trying to do is promote a broad consensus, global consensus on internet governance. And this has become a real hot button recently and a real debating point. We believe that in order to continue to reap the benefits that we've had from cyberspace, the way that the internet has grown up, this multi-stakeholder nature of governance, where you have not just governments, but you have the academic community, the engineering community, the civil society community, and private industry, all coming together to run the technical nature of the internet is absolutely important. And that's why we, in the U.S. and many other countries, really promote this inclusive method of internet governance and oppose efforts to impose some sort of intergovernmental institutional control, which we think would really undo all the good that the internet's been able to do and really fragment the internet, which would defeat both the economic benefits and the social benefits. Now, there are some countries who, again, in the guise of cybersecurity, are very worried about what the internet has enabled, the kind of free flow of information it's enabled. And when they talk about internet governance issues and state control, they're trying to control that information. So that's one major thing. And the second is related to that, and that's working to make sure we increase, while we're increasing the resilience and reduce the risk in cyberspace, we're also promoting the positive vision of internet freedom. And there have been many threats to internet freedom over the past few years, and again, I think from some states that want to impose tighter state controls. But we need to keep all of these things in mind. We need to keep security, we need to keep the human rights aspects, we need to keep the governance aspects all together. They're all overlapping and they're all related. So to sum up, we have a vision of building a resilience and reducing risk in cyberspace while preserving the core values that we all rely on. We believe that achieving this vision is not just a domestic issue, but an international issue, and it's a higher policy issue. And we look forward to working with all of you because international collaboration is very, very important. And since I'm over my time, I guess I'll leave my hacker joke to some other time.